Hey everybody, I'm Alex Simons. I'm the Corporate Vice President for Microsoft's Identity and Network Access Division Program Management team. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about Zero Trust and share some of the things we've learned over the last 2 years as we've gone on this big Zero Trust journey with our customers. And then we have a special guest who's going to come to tell you about some of the new emerging trends in Zero Trust I think you'll find really interesting. Now, as we all know, the last 2 years have been kind of crazy. If you think about the 18 months or so of COVID quarantines, plus a whole bunch of new kind of nation-state attacks that we've never had to worry about before, there's a lot of things that as either an IT professional or as a security professional, you need to think about maybe a little differently than you did in the past. And a Zero Trust architecture will help you with all of those, but I want to point out some specific areas that maybe you aren't thinking about that you want to pay a lot of attention to. But let's start by just talking about kind of the two big trends that are impacting all of us. The first, obviously, is this big move to kind of remote and hybrid work arrangements. You know, at the beginning of COVID, we sent everybody home and we had to rapidly adapt to people being able to be productive remotely. The second big trend I want to talk to you about is the incredible sophistication and the rise kind of nation-state actors who are doing amazingly complex and sophisticated attacks that we all need to be ready and prepared to defend ourselves against. So first of all, let's just start talking about our employees. So at the beginning of COVID, we sent a ton of people home. In fact, in the United States, in the month of March last year of 2020, the internet usage in the United States went up more than 41% during the day because we sent so many people home either to learn or to work. So just a huge shift in the way that people do work and the way that we as security professionals had to think about keeping our employees and all of our systems secure. Now, the big question is, are they going to come back to the office? And increasingly, I think we're seeing that the answer is only sort of. Right? In fact, in a lot of cases, if you think about the best and the brightest workers in the world, the high-tech workers that we all need to build software for us, a lot of the best kind of white-collar information worker kinds of employees, they're going to increasingly, they are demanding that they are enabled with remote and hybrid work options where either they can be full-time remote or where they're in the office a few days and they work from home a few days. So I think we're going to continue to see this trend. I know at Microsoft we're doing this. Many of our customers are starting to offer these kinds of hybrid and remote work options for people as well. And in addition, I saw today even Amazon is going to offering the option for their employees. That's a big change for them. So really, I think you can see that that is the trend of the future. If you want to be able to compete for the employees of the future and really bring in the best talent, you've got to have a way to provide them with a very high quality remote work experience that is super secure and that meets all of your compliance requirements as well. So that's kind of the first big trend I would really think about. It's almost like Zero Trust is becoming as much a security issue as it's becoming an HR and war for talent kind of issue, because that's the only way you're going to be able to bring in the best and brightest for the future of your company. Now, the next big trend, obviously, is the rise of kind of nation-state actors. Now, you've probably read about SolarWinds or Nobelium and a whole bunch of those attacks and things that happened. But before we go there, first, I just want to talk about, look, 4 or 5 companies are already working on how to get toward a hybrid workplace. But a ton of them have a lot of concerns about that, right? Like, how do I secure that hybrid workplace? According to a recent Wall Street Journal article, 94% of corporations have some kind of concern about how are they going to secure their infrastructure in a world where their employees are remote. So that's one definite thing we have to think about. I think the thing we have to be even more concerned about, though, is how all of us now are at risk from nation-state attackers, and how with increasing levels of sophistication, those attackers are coming in and trying to take over key parts of our infrastructure in order to attack the people who are our customers or our suppliers or things like that. So you've probably read about a ton of these, but I want to point out a few differences from what we've seen in the past. The first is that these are not script kiddies. These are not Nigerian gangs of hackers. These folks are real professionals. Right? So they've come in and I'm not going to walk you through this whole slide, but they've done this incredible job of attacking from many different vectors. They attacked from partner websites, they attacked from internal sites, they attacked from applications. They just had the most amazing set of very sophisticated attack patterns, including obviously the SolarWinds embedded software as well. Now, but there is a key difference in this I want to point out to you. It's not just that they're incredibly sophisticated, but they also used a new technique we haven't seen as much in the past, which is they took over existing applications and the identities of those applications. And so you can see here, I've highlighted a few places on this slide. What they did was they went in and they added new privileges to a set of existing identities that were representing applications, and then they used those identities to be able to extract email or other secret information from companies in ways that were much more sophisticated in the past. And this is a very new kind of different attack pattern than we've traditionally seen. It's not your old password spray or dictionary play take over a user's account or a partner employee's account. This is much, much deeper in the system and is really about the software that you're using as well as the people. Now, that's the key thing to really think about. And this is not only the nation-state attackers that are very sophisticated, they're attacking every kind of identity, right? So they're going after user identities, they're going after admin identities, of course, because those are super valuable. But now they're also starting to go after what we think of as workload identities, essentially the identities that your software services use to get things done. And in addition, these attackers, like all attackers, they tend to think in graphs. Right now, traditionally, that graph of attack has been inside and thinking about sideways elevation and how do I move from one system to a next. Now they're thinking of that graph across entire ecosystems like supply chains and all of the intricate interconnections between our organizations. And they're thinking about how from one company I can gain a foothold and use that to attack another company. And that's a very new pattern, and that means that any of us who are in the supply chain of somebody who they are trying to attack is now also under threat from these nation-state attackers. And that greatly increases their surface area, and it greatly increases the threat to all of us. So all of us have to now up our game substantially to be ready to take care of nation-state attackers, whereas in the past, most companies in the world didn't have to worry about that very much. So if you think about those two key trends, they really emphasize the importance of getting to a zero trust architecture and doing it comprehensively for everything. So let's talk about why that's the case. We need this new approach because most traditional security models were based kind of on a network perimeter and using your VPN. And once you got through that, everything internally was trusted. And that was great for kind of maybe 2005 kind of security, but the world has really changed. We've gone from a world where most of the users were employees to a world where lots of the users are employees and customers and partners. In fact, some of those users are now software itself. Right? We've gone from a world where most of this was about corporate desktops and maybe an occasional tablet or something like that, to a world where people are using their home machines, their personal phones, all kinds of devices that we never imagined having to protect before. The third big trend is we've gone from on-premise applications where almost everything was happening within your corporate data center behind your firewall to a world of cloud apps where all of the interesting innovation is happening outside your firewall. The next big change obviously is work is not being done at work as much anymore. Everybody used to come into the office, and now we have to prepare people and enable them to securely do work remotely. And then finally, we've gone from a place where most of us only had to worry about things like criminal syndicates and like script kiddies and hackers and things like that. And now we all have to be prepared to really protect ourselves from these high-level nation-state actors. So that's a really big change in the environment. And it's the number one reason why we think it's important to get to a zero-trust architecture. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our philosophy at Microsoft around zero trust. We think there are three key things you need to think about. The first is you need to verify everything explicitly. The second is you need to always use a least privilege access model so that if something gets compromised, it can't be used for very many things. And then finally, you need to always assume that no matter how good your security is, you'll be breached. And you want lots of ways to monitor and react appropriately once you get breached. So let's start with verify explicitly. Now, traditionally, this starts with your human identities. These are the people who work in your company or your partners or your customers. You want to make sure that you evaluate them. How safe are they? How high is their risk? Where are they coming from? What groups and roles are they members of before you let them get access to anything? And the most important part of that is to verify them strongly. And that means using something like MFA everywhere, or using one of our strong passwordless authentication factors, maybe like Windows Hello or the Authenticator app, some way to easily prove that that user is who they say they are, and that they are trustworthy and not some kind of foreign actor. But in addition, like I was saying, it's not good enough anymore just to verify your human identities. Now you need to get good at verifying your workload identities, those identities that back your software services, to make sure that they are equally validated and that you are thinking about their roles and permissions and groups and things like that just as much as you would for a human identity. Now, the next key piece of verification is obviously verifying your devices, making sure that whether it's a corporate desktop or a PC or a laptop at home or a phone, that it's in great shape, that it's encrypted, that it's been protected from antiviral, you've got antivirus running, that it's in really good condition before you let it into anything. So that's really important. You want to make sure that that's the second key thing you verify. So verify all of your identities, verify all of your devices before you give them access. And then you want to back this up with real-time policy enforcement so that as all of that context is coming in, particularly your risk signals, you want to be able to make real-time choices around, should this user on this device be able to access this particular item at this point? And all of those together give you a really great position for when you're trying to verify everything. The next key pillar I want to talk to you about is using a least privilege access model. Now, this is really important so that if one of your identities is taken over, it can only do a small number of low-risk things. So you got to keep in mind that, unfortunately, over time, if you don't govern your identities well, what happens is you get this big creep, right? Like gradually over time, an identity can do more and more and more things. So maybe it's a person changing jobs, they move to a new role, you don't remove some of their old privileges, or it's an identity in software and the developer just keeps adding more and more privileges to it. And you get this huge creep where all of a sudden you've got way more risk in your system than you needed, and you've lost that least privileged access approach. So to help with that, the first thing you need to do is have a great governance system. So this is a way that as employees join your company, you automatically assign them to the correct applications. Maybe when they need new applications, they have to go through an approval process. When they change roles, you automatically move them into the new things they need and take away their old privileges. Like that automated governance process gives you the ability to keep that least privilege access model in place and not have it just grow out exponentially. But now you need to think about, hey, how am I going to do that for my workload identities as well? So it's not good enough to have a governance system just for humans now. Now you need a governance system for your workload identities and ways to make sure, hey, who's the developer who owns this identity? Making sure you check periodically, does it still need all of the privileges it had? Are there times when we should just retire that workload identity because it's not being used anymore? Like, you just have to have all the systems in place to, again, keep those privileges compacted to what's only necessary at that moment in time. In addition, you need a way to be able to govern access to your data. So this means you need a consistent way to track your data across all of your files, your data stores, your databases, things like that. You've got to have consistent labeling policies, either automated systems that are catching and applying labels for you, or ways for people to label their documents easily. You need policy systems that then can take use of that label data and make sure that only the right people in the right situation can get access to it. And then finally, you need all of the monitoring systems so that you can see where's that data going, what's happening with it, who's using it, and make sure that you can withdraw access if something inappropriate happens. And then finally, you need to be able to manage and monitor your entitlements. What are all of the things that can get to your resources, and should they be able to at that moment? Being able to drill into each of your important resources, your critical resources, and make sure that only the right users and workloads and systems can get access to them at any one time, particularly as we sprawl across more and more clouds, as maybe you've got some of your workloads in Azure, you've got some of them in AWS, you've got some of them maybe even in GCP. You need ways to be able to monitor your entitlements across that whole set of workloads and make sure that you're not getting more and more creep just because something might be out of sight or not tracked centrally. So that's all about using least privilege access. Finally, we always have to keep in mind an assume breach mentality. Even with all of this great security in place, you want to make sure you have all the systems in place that in case you're breached, you know what to do about it. The first key part of that is to make sure you have great telemetry and monitoring. And you need that across your entire estate. You need that across your identities. You need that across your devices. You need that for your applications. You need that for your network. So you got to have great monitoring and telemetry everywhere. You need to be able to get that all into one tool, one smart SIEM where you can see what's going on, where you can go do investigations and things like that, and where you get notified when there are unusual activities. So you really have to be able to bring all of that together and then enhance it with data from a third-party ecosystem, both threat intelligence data that's going to help you know what's going on in the world, but also signal from third-party services and systems to make sure that those can be incorporated into that same set of views, so that when your investigators are trying to figure out what's going on, or your machine learning is automatically detecting problems for you, it can see the largest possible aperture of data to be able to make those kinds of decisions. It's really important that you don't leave these decisions just to humans. There's just too many signals and too many things going on. So we want to have really great machine learning and AI that are helping us detect any kind of unusual user or entity behaviors. That's an important thing, especially because the attackers adapt so quickly. So if you think about some of the new attacks we've seen recently, things like token theft and replay, forged SAML tokens, attacks against software and workload identities, like those are all new attack patterns. You can't afford to have to go rewrite your software every time that happens. What you need is a very flexible, adaptable system that is looking at all your telemetry and is using the world-class machine learning to pick out those new attack patterns on the fly and adapt to you as the attackers adapt around you. And then lastly, you've got to make sure that you have automated mitigations in place so that when something happens, you know what you're going to do about it. So some of that might be real-time things like, hey, we're going to force an MFA, or when a username and password are detected as leaked, you're going to automatically force a user to come up with a new one. You're going to put somebody into a minimal access mode, maybe when they're coming from a home machine that you don't totally trust. Or you also got to think about what are you going to do after an attack in terms of responses. So you want to be able to automate things like, hey, who do you need to notify about it? How do you go about blocking maybe different parts of your network or different access patterns? And then finally, just make sure that the whole thing is automated so that your security personnel don't have to make up new playbooks on the fly. So that covers all three of the key pillars for Microsoft: verify explicitly, use a least privilege access model, and assume breach. I think if you can get those right, you're well on your way to having an awesome zero trust model. As you're building out your zero trust system, you need to think about it very comprehensively. Now, you don't have to do all of this at once, but you need to have a roadmap for how to get there. So first of all, let's make sure that all of our identities are well protected. We want to have MFA on all of our users. We want to have no password accounts for all of our workload identities. We want to have our devices well managed. We want to make sure that they're running some kind of antivirus so that we know they're in a great state and that they're encrypted. That's the only kind of device we want to be able to access our corporate resources. And then finally, you got to make sure you understand, hey, what are all the things I have to protect? What are all the applications and the data I'm monitoring? What's the networking I have to worry about? What's all the infrastructure I need to protect in the cloud? Like, you got to make sure you have a good comprehensive list there. Then finally, you want to be able to make sure, hey, how am I going to check all of my posture and make sure that I'm in the kind of least privileged state that I want to be in? And then finally, I want to have a way that I can monitor all of the user and entity behavior, get all of the telemetry data out, and so that I can continually be looking for unusual behaviors and get my investigators all of the visibility they need to be able to manage mitigations in the case that we do get breached. So with that, what I want to do is invite Steve Turner from Forrester up. Steve is going to talk to you about a bunch of the emerging trends in zero trust that I think you'll find really useful.
Hi everybody, my name is Steve Turner. I'm an analyst here at Forrester Research covering zero trust and a bunch of other security adjacent areas. And today I'm coming here to talk to you about where zero trust is headed and the emerging trends that we're seeing in the space. So to kind of lay the groundwork, right, a lot of organizations are having different challenges, with the top challenges being the changing and evolving threat landscape that Alex had mentioned earlier in the presentation. One of the other things that we hear from a lot of organizations is that the complexity of their IT environments, are requiring changing how they're doing things. When we went out and surveyed security leaders out there, they talked about the fact that 64% of them are adopting a zero trust security architecture. Folks are finally deciding that change is needed in order to protect themselves against the adversaries that are out there. The biggest success that we hear from a lot of folks as they move towards their, meeting the goals of their zero trust strategy is the fact that they're able to reach a lot of their technology consolidation goals to protect their enterprises and organizations. So reaching those goals is pivotal to being able to have that integrated security architecture that Zero Trust demands. One of the major things that we observed and heard from different end user clients about was this movement from their virtual private networks, or VPNs, to Zero Trust networking access, or ZTNA solutions, in order to improve the user experience as everybody went to working from home. We saw a lot of organizations make the move from on-prem identity stores to identity as a service, or IDaaS solutions, in order to realize the context and verification goals of implementing Zero Trust. And then one of my favorite things that I hear about from organizations that are successful as they navigate down their Zero Trust journey is having multiple teams involved in the planning process. Something transformational like Zero Trust can't be realized without having everybody in the organization having some sort of weigh-in on what that Zero Trust architecture looks like. At the end of the day, that transformational change that you're doing with Zero Trust requires information from folks that have boots on the ground, that they're trying to just get their jobs done. So you want to be able to solve their problems while increasing the security posture of your organization. And for folks that are very successful down their Zero Trust journey, they're doing just that. That's exactly how you execute on your Zero Trust strategy in order to make things happen. When we talk about the failures, we see that there's a lot of misunderstanding. We see that a lot of folks think about Zero Trust from the lens when it came out over a decade ago, Zero Trust being a network security framework. It has evolved way past that at this point. It incorporates way more, technologies, way more pillars, way more security capabilities, all to inform those access decisions that your organizations are realizing as they build out their Zero Trust architecture. So when we talk about the challenges, right, that backs into this idea of organizations not having a common understanding of Zero Trust. A lot of organizations that go down the path of Zero Trust without doing or mapping out the capabilities that they have, whether it be in their identity environment, networking security standpoint, device security standpoint, those are organizations that we see just continue to build up additional technical debt. One of the biggest things that continues to be an issue for a lot of organizations is understanding the overarching architecture of designing a Zero Trust architecture, understanding the components that go into that. A lot of organizations come to us and say, you know what, we understand what Zero Trust is, but how do we actually build a Zero Trust architecture that takes into account the different control points and technologies that we have within our organization? And then that leads me to my next point and the next trend that we're seeing around challenges that organizations are having. Organizations that take a very technical approach to Zero Trust are doomed for failure. We've seen it time and time again. Organizations coming to us and saying, we've built out a Zero Trust architecture. We've built out a bunch of different things using the different controls that we have available. And then when we ask them, what informed that architecture? Did you talk to people about how they're trying to get their jobs done in the different lines of business that you have within your organization? And in a lot of those instances, the common answer is no. So we find out that organizations that move ahead with this very, very technical approach to Zero Trust end up in failure because folks either push back significantly because they're part of a pilot of launching that Zero Trust architecture within their organization, and they see that it's not improving their experience, or it's getting more in the way of them trying to get their jobs done. And then the last common trend that we see around these challenges that organizations are having is the folks that bought in early to the Zero Trust cure-all, or the different solutions that are out there that advertised it as an all or nothing approach to Zero Trust that they could deliver by buying into, X vendor solution. that they would now have zero trust within the organization. We're hearing time and time again from our clients and a bunch of different end user organizations that approach has failed for them. They want to find vendors that they can trust. They want to find business partners that they can trust to realize their zero trust goals instead of buying into that cure-all. A lot of organizations are still relying on their on-prem security controls. This is from 2021 data, and we found overwhelmingly that a lot of organizations have still not taken the step of moving those security controls into the cloud where possible. They're still managing on-prem security stacks that cost them significant resources and a lot of overhead into the different operational realities that they're living. As we talk around the broader kind of technology trends and the areas that we hear a lot of end user organizations ask us about, they ask us about zero trust platforms that they can plug in those different technology capabilities into in order to realize, their holistic zero trust architecture. Because at the end of the day, organizations are demanding that they have platforms that have open integration to pull in additional attributes and context to inform the access decisions that they're making. A lot of organizations have very specific business processes, and they want to be able to pull in the relevant attributes or context in order to inform those access decisions. Organizations are looking for a unification of their security policy across all of those different control points. This is something that we hear about time and time again. They don't want to hop into 20 different consoles to realize that better security posture. They want proactive analysis of their security policies within the organization, utilizing the context that they're already pulling in from those different control points. And then they want out-of-the-box orchestration. A lot of teams are tapped for resources. They're not getting additional headcount in a lot of cases. They want to be able to automate and take action and have a template to be able to automate the mundane within their organization. A lot of organizations want the one ring to rule them all when it comes to a zero trust platform. They want to be able to go to one place to manage all of the control points that they've integrated. They don't want to do the custom work where they don't have to. Where are we seeing innovation in this space, right? And this is not just going to be about zero trust platforms themselves. This is going to be around all of the different elements of that zero trust architecture that you're building out. We're seeing innovation around those centralized control planes that I was just talking about, whether you call them zero trust platforms or something else. We're seeing a lot of heavy innovation in that space where more and more technologies are being introduced or more platforms are being introduced that allow organizations to bring their own technology stack to realize their zero trust realities. On the automation, orchestration, and threat detection and response front, while we hear about things like XDR, network analysis and visibility, all of those things are rapidly evolving to meet the zero trust needs that organizations are requiring. We're seeing a lot of those orchestration actions being taken automatically, those playbooks coming out of the box and matching themselves to the attributes or context of organizations without organizations having to lift a finger to design those playbooks manually. And then around the vulnerability management and configuration management space, we're seeing microsegmentation vendors. We're seeing a variety of different technologies proactively assess the security posture of your organization and suggest where you have the most risk, either from unpatched systems, appliances that are exposed to a particular vulnerability that's being exploited. We're seeing all of this information begin to flood in and take in the appropriate context again to inform where organizations should be prioritizing remediation actions. And then the last space that we're seeing significant innovation is from a silicon and hardware security front. We're seeing operating systems come out of the box having significant security requirements in order to make sure that organizations are safe. TPMs, while they have been used historically to store drive encryption keys, are now being used for even more security features and to enable attackers or adversaries not to exfiltrate passwords, usernames, or to just really harden the overall security posture of those systems that we rely on every day. And then from a firmware perspective, firmware on devices or the relevant things that help kind of run or inform those devices on how they're running have become hardened and more informed by the ecosystem around them. If they know that something has been changed on the device or something's been tampered with and they are not able to verify the integrity holistically of that device, a lot of firmware out there will intelligently stop the device from booting or inform a user that a device has been compromised. So that just gives you a taste for what is happening around the zero trust space and all of the different control points that inform your zero trust architecture. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to you, Alex.
Thanks, Steve. That was really useful. It's great to hear about these emerging set of trends so that we can all start in our heads thinking about how do I get ready for that future world. Okay, so I want to close out with some reminders and just a review of our principles. So first, the 3 principles. First, verify everything explicitly, both human and workload identities. The second thing is to always use a least privilege access model. And the third is to make sure that you assume breach and that you are prepared with all the right telemetry and sensors and automated mitigations. To do this, you need to take a comprehensive look across your entire organization. You don't have to do it all at once, but you need to have a good roadmap in place and make sure that you can protect all of your identities, all of your devices, all of your corporate resources, and that you have great ways to monitor your posture and a great SIEM solution for monitoring all of the telemetry and actions happening. Microsoft is the only vendor that can bring all of this together for you. And I think what you'll find is that with our comprehensive solution, we put you in an amazing place to build a zero trust architecture that enables you to be ready for this new world. What's next? Hey, let me give you a few action items. The first, get started on inventorying all of your applications and your workload identities, especially those workload identities. Don't forget about those. Govern and get ready to govern and manage those workload identities the same way you do users. That's really different than we've thought about in the past, but you got to make sure that your software is managed just the same way that your users are. Make sure that you're enforcing conditional access policies, both for users and for software identities, and that you're requiring people to have well-managed devices in a great, clean state. Make sure you assess your security posture and monitor for creep. It's not good enough to just say, hey, I've got the right people in the right places. You got to be monitoring and make sure that their privileges aren't growing over time. And then finally, it really is worth your time to sit down ahead of time and tabletop out what are all of the responses that we need and think about how many of those you can automate so that your team doesn't need to invent them on the fly the next time you find a breach. Thanks a ton for your time today. And if you heard anything from me, it's let's make sure to turn on MFA everywhere or get some kind of strong authentication. That's a great way to get started on your zero trust journey, and it will decrease your risk by more than 99%. Thanks a ton for your time today. Nice to talk to you.
We've already learned so much here at Microsoft Ignite. We've learned how to protect our organizations against the latest adversarial trends, stay resilient while managing risk and compliance, and how to strengthen our security posture from some of the industry's principal thought leaders. Now, get excited as we look ahead to the future of security in today's upcoming sessions. Hi, I'm Jessica Feku, Security Product Marketing Manager here at Microsoft. You just watched Microsoft Corporate Vice President of Program Management Alex Simons and Forrester analyst Steve Turner as they unpack the best practices and emerging trends for implementing a zero trust strategy. Learn more about this and how you can confidently embrace the future of security by checking out our other sessions. Gain a better understanding in the current state of cybersecurity talent pipeline from Microsoft General Manager of Digital Inclusion, Naria Santalucia in Breakout 245, as well as what's being done to resolve the cybersecurity fulfillment challenges by training in academic institutions. Discover more about the current nation-state threat landscape during Breakout 248 as Associate General Counsel and Head of Microsoft's Digital Security Unit, Kristen Goodwin, provides context for security leaders and practitioners who are looking to better understand the relevancy of these new dangers. Explore cloud security's top trends, emerging risks, and potential obstacles with Cloud Security Product Marketing Manager Adam Young and Forrester's analyst Andres Cesar in Breakout 249 as they share practical guidance on how you can protect your infrastructure, platform, and software as a service services. Join Microsoft's Director of IoT and Industrial Cybersecurity Phil Naray and Gartner analyst Cottrell Thielemann during Breakout Session 250 for a discussion on how you can create a cyber physical system risk strategy using the language of business to underline the role of security as a tactical business enabler. And you won't want to miss this discussion with Microsoft Principal Program Manager Aaron Miyake, Principal Engineering Program Manager Glenn Coletta, and Senior Program Manager Maud Teja-Venezia, joined by Carnegie Mellon's Dan Costa on a discussion about the unique challenges of insider risk and how to build an effective insider risk management program to meet these needs. Do you have any questions about anything you've heard in today's sessions? Ask us in the chat. Join us with live subject matter experts that are available during every session. If you can't make a session, don't worry, we've got you covered. Everything's available on demand at aka.ms/msignite21_security/on-demand. For the latest on what's happening in Microsoft security, visit us on the web at www.microsoft.com/security or follow us on social at MSFT Security on Twitter and Microsoft Security on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining us at Microsoft Ignite.